All right, we'll throw it up.
It is tails. Now, Mr. Bentsen will speak first. It is my great honor to present to you Mr. Lloyd M. Bentsen, Jr., Democratic candidate for the United States Senate.
Reverend clergy, Mrs. Winnick, Ms. Lance, distinguished guests, it's an honor for me to be here today and to share this platform with my opponent. I want to congratulate you on arranging this meeting, which helps us better understand the issues that are involved in this United States Senate race.
Thank you very much. Mr. and Ms. Bentsen and distinguished guests at the head table, I wish that we were going to have a full-scale debate, but I guess you, the League of Women Voters, some of the most active women in Texas, know what you're about. After all, the women's liberation, and I want to make the record very clear that I supported the amendment, which will give equal pay for equal jobs, is upon us. And somehow, God, in her infinite wisdom, is going to show us the way. I don't like to have to submit a text in advance, and I don't like the lack of opportunity for rebuttal, and I'd much prefer a free and full debate, just like in real life. But I'm grateful to be here at all.
You know, we had 95 consecutive months of prosperity under the Democrats. Sure, we had inflation, and inflation is bad, whether it's Democratic inflation or Republican inflation. It has to be cured by government policies and a desire to keep the budget balanced. But what we have done, we have exchanged an inflationary boom for inflationary recession. What we have done is exchanged wage and price guidelines for wage and price policies that don't work at all. Now, this administration was left with a budget surplus of over $1 billion. Now, nobody knows, or at least no one wants to comment, as to what kind of a deficit we're going to have in the next year or two. It'll probably go somewhere between $10 and $20 billion. Now, it'd be foolish for anyone to tell you that inflation and budget deficits are all the fault of the president.
President Nixon assumed the presidency with a rampant inflation on his hands, caused by deficits totaling $60.5 billion in 8 years, $25.4 billion in the last year alone. And this inflation had a momentum. With the judicious use of fiscal and monetary restraint, the president started to cool this red-hot inflation. He started moving us out of Vietnam, away from bigger and bigger war spending. And the result, certainly, some rise in unemployment and a slowing of the economy. And now there are clear signs that the economy is recovering and clear signs that the rate of inflation is down considerably. And the indicators, the consumer price index, cost of living, at a 3-year low compared to what they've been. Price rises in wholesale markets are down. Rise in productivity and labor costs. Prime rate is down again, and the government's paying less than what it used to pay for its money. And the stock market is responding. And there is hard, irrefutable evidence that the decline in production has ended. Housing starts in July. In August, we're running 21% above the first quarter of 70.
But there are other economic problems that concern me just as much as the inflationary, recessionary trends today. Within the gross national product, we know that it's presently below its potential, that economists are warning us that normal claims on our country's productive capacity exceed the projections well into the middle of the next decade, that unless we alter the trends of this economy, we will have far less relative growth than we've had since World War II. And I think this could have a drastic effect on our ability to solve the problems of our times and maintain the standard of living that we have been enjoying. how well we do as a people depends on how well we manage this economy. And how successfully we cope with the challenges of government hinges on the availability of public revenues. These revenues are obviously going to fall short of our needs during a time of economic slump, and that's what's happening today in our cities and our state capitals as well.
Real gross national product, with the inflation removed, is rose in the second quarter. And the consumer's plight is improved. Per capita disposable income, which is that income after taxes, was 3.7% higher. And when President Nixon took over, the rate of growth and inflationary growth in this country was 7%. And now it's been cut in half, the lowest rate in 4 years.
And there's no point in missing the opportunity to observe that the Democratic Party has a much better record of concern about the environment and the quality of life than the other party. Most of the legislation in this field has a Democratic label. Yet, in all honesty, I'm delighted to see that the Republicans want to get in on the act. Many of them have quit trying to kill some of these anti-pollution bills. It's going to take a great deal of cooperation on the part of a Republican president and a Democratic Congress to save this environment. After all, Democrats and Republicans have to breathe the same air, drink the same water, endure the same crowded cities, and suffer from the same assaults against eyes, nose, ears, and the spirit. But I want to do more than just tough laws. I want us to do some clear thinking about how we might approach these problems of our environment today. I have advocated that we expand the NASA Manned Spacecraft Center scientific research into the pollution field. The space program has been undergoing some drastic budget cuts. I think it's both short-sighted and tragic to disperse this tremendous talent when we could concentrate the brain power on other national needs of high priority. NASA is already monitoring environmental problems. I want these functions expanded. And since we urgently need more involvement of business and industry, I believe that the Spacecraft Center can be the catalyst for bringing together the public sector and the private sector in this work. Now let's take this one step further, and a very major one. The federal government has a trust fund for the highway system, a trust fund for Social Security, a trust fund for unemployment compensation. I propose that we create an environmental trust fund designed to provide long-term, low-interest rates to private business and grants to municipalities for the purpose of fighting pollution at all levels and on all fronts. It could provide additional resources for stepped-up research. It could hasten the day when we have an automobile that doesn't pollute, when we have detergents that don't pollute, and fertilizers that don't pollute. It could push forward the corrective programs we need to stop the municipal pollution of our lakes and our streams. And it could speed up the capability of many industries to modernize their plants and their waste disposal systems. Now, I know financing this fund would require some new taxes, but the cost would be reduced by making it a revolving fund and by utilizing a private loan guarantee system similar to that of the FHA and the Small Business Administration. This war against pollution will be a test of our system of government, politics, and our public communications. I say, let's get on with it, with all of the resources and imagination that we can bring to this cause. Our present programs are inadequate. Let's make some major changes, some major reforms.
It's easy for people to say in a campaign trail, I'm for a balanced budget, but I wouldn't cut there. It's easy to go over and say, well, I want a strong space program, but yes, I did support the funding levels, existing levels which is going to give us a strong leadership role, but levels which are substantially below because I want to see it done within the framework of a balanced budget. Now, we were supposed to talk also about congressional reform, and to solve this, it seems to me we've got to look forward. I want to see a change in the following big areas. I want to see more congressional reorganization, and we passed a bill now, but it's a minimum bill. I want to see a change in the seniority system, and this does not require legislation. I figure I want to see a consideration other than seniority alone for electing committee chairmen. What's wrong with the election by one's peers, I ask? Congress is the only place in the world where you just hang in there the longest to get to run things. Why not ability and energy? Why not the Congress be like real life? The Constitution sets the lower age on public service. Why not a higher age? And my retirement bill, recognizing the great burdens on judges and congressmen in 70, suggests a mandatory retirement age at 70. Let the people decide. And I think, let me say this, that some uninformed critics of the proposal are saying, oh, you're aiming this at some chairman, you're aiming it at some individual. My bill exempts seated members of Congress, seated members of the judiciary, so it can be considered on its merits alone. I've introduced a bill for more disclosures on campaign contribution. A pet proposal is one for ethical reform, for full disclosure. Part of the legislation I sponsored has become law, an ethics committee. But to do nothing now, in terms of disclosure, is to increase the cynicism of the legitimate critics of the system. To move now towards full disclosure is going to reinstill confidence in the system. And so the old politics of using one's office to profit by the dam or the bank charter or the license or the contract, that's simply not good enough for this country in 1970. And so I think disclosure should not be restricted to office holders. My bill says that all candidates should be compelled to comply. And so should state and local office holders, I think. There's a changing ethic in Texas, and there's a changing ethic in the country, and we better be aware of it. We must not be afraid to make progressive changes for the future. Congressional, electoral, ethical reform. This is what we need so that our system will have the continued and the increasing support of the people. Thank you very much.
I believe that Texans need the representation of a Democrat who will support the president when he thinks he's right and who can oppose the president when he thinks he's wrong. And it's just as simple as that. Now, in one place especially, I think the president has been wrong. And I'm speaking of the economic policies which have given us the dubious blessings of tight money, the highest interest rates that we've had since the Civil War, a crippled home building industry, a tumbling stock market, business failures, and the highest unemployment rate in years, all without stopping the increase in inflation.
To be leveled, it belongs to those big spenders in the Congress who continually vote for more and more spending, unwilling to vote for the revenues. I fault the leadership in the Congress, and I want to see it change. I want to see Senator Tower become chairman of the Banking Committee in the Senate, and I'll vote for this change on my very first vote.